So I'm driving down Route 60 the other day and I glanced to the right and there it is again. The Des Plaines River doing its thing, swallowing the hiking trails, creeping across the golf course fairways at the Lincolnshire Marriott, threatening homes, roads closed, Lake County sending out emergency email blasts, flood warnings for Gurnee, flood warnings for Russell, flood warnings for Lincolnshire. And I'm sitting there in traffic watching it and thinking the same thought I think every single time this happens. Why does this river flood so fast? And why does it flood so much? Because here's the thing, if you live in Lake County, this isn't a surprise. This isn't some rare, catastrophic 100-year event. This is just spring, almost every spring. It just happens. You get a bunch of rain, you wait about 48 hours, and then your county government sends you an email that says, and I'm paraphrasing, heads up, the river is doing its river thing again. So today, I actually want to answer that question. Why does the Des Plaines River flood the way it does? Because the answer isn't just, it rained a lot. The answer is actually fascinating, and it goes back thousands of years, maybe tens of thousands. Let's go. Let me give you a sense of scale, because I think most people who drive over the Des Plaines River on Route 60 have no idea how large this thing actually is in terms of the area it drains. The Des Plaines River watershed covers 1,455 square miles. That's nearly 1 million acres spanning northeastern Illinois and southeastern Wisconsin. The river actually begins near Union Grove, Wisconsin, flows south through Racine and Kenosha counties, and then enters Illinois and continues through Lake, Cook, and Will counties. Right here in Lake County, the Des Plaines River watershed drains the central 204 square miles of our county. That's 44% of the entire county. Let me put that in perspective. When it rains anywhere in a massive chunk of Wisconsin and northern Illinois, all of that water is eventually trying to get to the same river. The same river that runs behind Marriott in Lincolnshire and parallel to hiking trails that you jog on. The river itself is approximately 134 miles long, flowing through Lake and Cook counties, before turning southwest and eventually merging with the Kankakee River to form the Illinois River, which then flows into the Mississippi. So the river that looks kind of modest when you're crossing it on Half Day Road, it's part of a chain that connects Wisconsin all the way to the Gulf of America. It's not a small stream with a flooding problem. It's a major regional waterway with a very, very large yard. Now, here's where it gets wild. The reason the Des Plaines River floods the way it does at its core is a 10,000-year-old story. This land, all of it, Lake County, northeastern Illinois, the Chicago area, is a glacial landscape. It was shaped by massive glaciers that retreated at the end of the last ice age. And when those glaciers left, they didn't leave behind the kind of landscape that handles water efficiently, not even close. The valleys of Fox, Des Plaines, and Illinois rivers were all cut by glacial meltwater streams. When the Wisconsin Glacier retreated into the Lake Michigan Basin, a proglacial lake known as Lake Chicago formed. This lake drained by the way of what's called the Chicago Outlet. What that means in plain English is this. The entire bowl that became northeastern Illinois was basically a massive glacial lake. And when it drained, it left behind an extraordinary flat landscape. That's not an accident in nature. That's the result. That's what happens when a glacier melts and the water drains away. The Chicagoland area is topographically dominated by the glacial Lake Chicago Plain. Early explorers discovered the Chicago Portage, an area that was only 15 feet above the level of Lake Michigan and right on the watershed divide between the Mississippi River basins and the Great Lakes. The natural condition of the region was swampy. 15 feet, the entire divide between water flowing towards the Gulf of America versus water flowing into the Great Lakes. 15 feet of elevation difference. That's how flat it is. That's how little gradient the land has. And that right there is your first big answer. The Des Plaines River floods fast because the land it flows through is essentially flat. There's almost no slope. There's no quick downhill path for the water. So when rain falls on this landscape, it spreads out, it pools, and it lingers. And it slowly, inevitably makes its way to the river, which then has nowhere fast to go either. Here's a concept I want you to visualize. Imagine a funnel. You pour water into the top of the funnel where it's wide, and then it all has to squeeze out through this narrow spout. The Des Plaines River is that narrow spout, and the funnel, the watershed, is enormous. In Gurnee alone, there are 235 square miles of drainage upstream of the river. 235 square miles. And all of that rain, all of that runoff is flowing to the same river channel that runs through Lincolnshire and Gurnee and past the hiking trails that you were on last weekend. The river channel's width typically ranges from 50 to 150 feet in natural sections. much narrower than its floodplain, which can extend over a mile wide. A mile. That's the floodplain. That's the area that the water historically, and by historically I mean for thousands of years before any of us got here, has always claimed when the river rises. So when we drive past the Marriott and see the golf course underwater, that golf course is built on an ancient floodplain. It's not that the river is misbehaving, it's that we put a golf course in the river's historical living room. This is the part that's uncomfortable to talk about because it involves choices we made as a society. But it's also one of the biggest drivers of why flooding has gotten worse over the years, not just here, but everywhere in the suburban Chicago region. Here's how it used to work. Before development, this landscape was forested and wetland. When rain fell, a significant portion of it was absorbed by the soil, the vegetation, the natural wetlands and marshes. They covered huge portions of northeastern Illinois. The water just soaked in, it was filtered down, and it moved around slowly. When a storm occurs in undeveloped areas, only about half of the rainfall enters the stream immediately. The rest is absorbed, and even that absorbed water seeps back out slowly over a day or two. But in urban areas where roads and buildings have replaced the land surface, the rainfall, it can't infiltrate the ground. It runs off directly into streams and very quickly. The result is a very fast and short-lived urban flood, rather than a gradual rise and fall. Now look around at Lake County. We've got massive subdivisions. We've got shopping centers, parking lots. These are all impervious surfaces that doesn't allow the water to get absorbed by the ground. It redirects it immediately into drainage ditches and storm sewers and streams, and eventually the Des Plaines River. With less storage capacity for water in urban basins and more rapid runoff, urban streams rise more quickly during storms and have higher peak discharge rates than rural streams. The total volume of water discharged during a flood also tends to be larger for urban streams. And here's the kicker. The NOAA report from 1986 described this problem along the Des Plaines watershed in words that are almost poetic in how depressing they are. The report said, the majority of the watershed in Cook and DuPage counties consists of highly developed residential and commercial properties. What little land that is left for farming is diminishing constantly because of the establishment of new shopping centers, subdivisions, and light industry. That was 40 years ago, when there was still some farmland around. Imagine if those authors could see it today. We didn't just develop the watershed, we nearly paved over the entire thing. And every square foot of pavement is another square foot of water that goes directly to the river instead of soaking into the ground. This is the thing that explains why a storm that might be manageable in July becomes a disaster in April. One of the most devastating floods along the Des Plaines River was exacerbated by the fact that soils were already saturated while the river levels were already high due to a combination of snowmelt and a wet early spring. Several rounds of storms produced flooding that caused approximately $375 million in damage along the Des Plaines and Illinois rivers. The phrase, soils already saturated, is key. Think of the ground like a sponge. If you have a dry sponge and you pour water into it, the sponge absorbs it. But if the sponge is already soaked, completely waterlogged, and you pour more water onto it, it's just going to run off. The sponge can't take anymore. That's exactly what happens in a Lake County spring. We get snow, the snow melts, the ground absorbs some of that, and then we get rain in March, the ground absorbs more of that, and then we get more rain in April, and now the ground is maxed out, the sponge is full, and when the next storm comes, all of it, every drop, just runs off immediately directly into the streams and river. That's when the Des Plaines River goes from a little high to where Route 60 used to be. Lake County authorities have already issued a warning that parts of the river could overflow after recent storms saturated the ground, making some of the roads impassable. Right now, in real time, that's what's happening. It's not the storm that got us, it's the accumulation. It's every storm since March that filled up the sponge. And just when you thought it couldn't get more complicated, there's one more wrinkle to this whole thing. The Des Plaines River starts in Wisconsin, which means that when Wisconsin gets heavy rain, we get those problems too. And we get them a little later as the water works its way downstream. Lake County issued a warning in 2019 that water levels were expected to rise in the Des Plaines River as the water made its way downstream from a heavily rained southeast Wisconsin. Local officials noted that residents should prepare for high water over several days and pay attention to weather and flooding forecasts. So it can literally be sunny and beautiful here in Lincolnshire or Vernon Hills or Lake Forest, and you can still be 3 days away from a flood because Wisconsin just got hammered and the river is just bringing it all down to us like an unwanted gift that travels 134 miles. So when I'm driving down Route 60 in Lincolnshire and I see the golf course underwater, that's not an accident, that's not bad luck. That's the convergence of 10,000 years of glacial geology, 235 square miles of upstream drainage, decades of suburban development, replacing the wetlands with parking lots, and rainstorms combined with snowmelt, and Wisconsin's water making its way south. The Cranes Landing golf course at the Lincolnshire Marriott has flooded multiple times, so many times that after the 2017 floods, the resort had to plant roughly 50 acres of new turf in the fall of 2017 after major flood damage. 50 acres of new turf, because the river essentially reclaimed its floodplain for a while and the golf course just happened to be in the way and kind of got swept away. In one flooding event, the water on Marriott Drive, the main road that goes in and out of the resort, had risen as high as the stop sign. The hotel was evacuated and guests were brought to dry land by trucks. A stop sign underwater on the main entrance to a major resort. It's not hyperbole. That's Lake County Spring just doing its thing. According to the National Weather Service, at 16 feet of flood stage, Route 60 Town Line Road is inundated near the river. At that stage, numerous structures along Milwaukee Avenue between Half Day Road and Deerfield Road are threatened. And the Lincolnshire Village website, to their credit, doesn't sugarcoat any of this. The village acknowledges plainly that while it cannot prevent flooding, it takes steps to reduce its impact. It can't prevent flooding. They just said it officially because there's no engineering solution that fully solves the problem. So is it going to get worse in the future? Well, the uncomfortable answer is probably yes. One Lincolnshire resident told CBS News Chicago, "I looked at the history and it was only 2 floods in 50 years. So I figured I was doing pretty good, except I've had 2 in 4 years. The odds are not with me." That captures the lived experience. What used to be generational events are starting to feel like annual events. And the reasons for that are everything I just described. More development, more impervious surfaces, more runoff, and more intense or even more frequent rainfalls. In the city of Des Moines alone, there are 1,200 acres located in a FEMA-designated floodplain, the most NFIP policies of any community in the state of Illinois. According to the FEMA data, some homes there have been damaged by flood 8 or 9 separate times since the mid-1980s. 8 or 9 times, same homes, same river, same problem, because of the underlying conditions that we just discussed. Here's what I want you to take away from all of this. The Des Moines River doesn't flood because of freak weather. It floods because of geography, geology, hydrology, and human choices layered on top of each other over thousands of years. And the last several decades of suburban development have accelerated it. The land was flat before we got here. The river's channel was always too small for the watershed. The wetlands that used to absorb the rain are mostly gone. And every new parking lot and subdivision where a marsh used to be makes the next flood a little bit worse. I'm not saying that you don't build things. I'm saying the next time you get that county email, the next time you're sitting on Route 60 watching the golf course disappear, the next time you see the hiking trail under 4 feet of brown water, now you know why. It's not just rain, it's ice, hundreds of years of land use decisions, and a river that's doing what rivers do. We just keep getting surprised by it. Who says luxury travel has to cost a fortune? Discovering Travel Bliss reveals the secrets to experiencing 5-star treatment without the 5-star price tag. Learn how to score upgrades, access exclusive experiences, and indulge in luxury for less. From hidden gem boutique hotels to insider tips for first-class flights, this book is your key to unlocking a world of affordable luxury. Elevate your travel experience without emptying your bank account. Get your copy today.